Welcome everyone, both in person and online, to this final session of the 2022 Global People's Forum. Our session is entitled Preparing for the Year Ahead, the 2023 SDG Summit and the 2024 Summit of the Future, Intersections and Interlinkages. So we had hoped that our esteemed C4UN co-chair, Maria Fernanda Espinoza, of the Global Women Leaders, would be here to set the stage and offer a welcome, but she's caught in crosstown traffic from there to here, so she's not able to join us in person. So, I think most of us know earlier this month, member states had decided that the UN will convene a high-level ministerial meeting in September 2023 in tandem with the SDG Summit to prepare for the Summit of the Future, which is now slated to take place in September of 2024. It is expected to result in world leaders endorsing a far-reaching pact for the future and related global policy frameworks, including a declaration on future generations, a new agenda for peace, and a global digital compact. So we have asked our panelists to help us identify and develop the synergies and thematic interlinkages between the 2023 SDG Summit and the 2024 Summit of the Future. This session will introduce the proposed Global Futures Forum as a key civil society event in early 2023 and will launch the collective drafting process for a civil society People's Pact for the Future to set out a range of ambitious proposals for strengthening global governance structures to deliver on the 2030 agenda, further develops from the best ideas featured in our common agenda report, and gives special consideration to empowering civil society in international decision-making. So without further ado, I would like to thank the Baha'i international community for their hospitality, for hosting the last session of this Global People's Assembly in a hybrid format, and invite our other C4UN co-chair, Dan Burrell, who needs no introduction, to introduce our speakers and moderate the proceedings. So, Dan.
Thanks, Jeff. Needs no introduction or deserves no introduction. It's really all the same. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, dear friends. It really is wonderful to be able to host this gathering, half in person and half online. We're really privileged to have the opportunity to share the space with at the Global People's Assembly. And we're hopeful that as momentum builds around the Summit of the Future, at the SDG Summit, and all of these sort of the summitry of the coming years, that we'll be able to also build the Global People's Assembly so it has ever greater impact and opportunity. So just building off of the bit of the context that Jeff provided, of course, the UN 75 political declaration called on the Secretary-General to produce a report, which is called Our Common Agenda. In that report, the Secretary-General called for a number of summits, which we've referenced a few times. The first one just completed a few days ago, the Transforming Education Summit. And I recognize very well that Our Common Agenda has received sort of mixed reviews from both member states and civil society. And I think that's to be expected. Whenever you're talking about UN reform, some reform is to the good and some reform may not be to the good. There's 193 member states, there's 8 billion people. No matter who the one person is, it's impossible to get whatever everybody might want. Some think that the analysis is great, but the prescription is insufficient. Others may say that specific proposals are either lacking or in fact may more deeply entrench some of the challenges we're seeing. And then there are important issues that many feel are missing. But this can all be true, while at the same time recognizing that a conversation is now open and that we have an opportunity, even a duty, to contribute to that conversation. So the context for me is that we can all agree that humanity has not reached the final stage in its international institutions. If we fast forward by a century, I doubt that we will look back and see and be celebrating the 175th anniversary of the UN. Or maybe it'll be 200 years or 300 years. But regardless, there will be something different in the future. So the question isn't whether we'll change, but how we'll change. So we don't know at this moment whether it'll be through reform of the current system, Will it be the creation of a new parallel system that outshines the UN in the long run? Will it come after further atrocities befall humanity? Or will it be through an act of collective volition? These questions are important, but almost, not entirely, almost immaterial to the conversation we're having today, because if we know that there's going to be change, then we have to be trying to figure out how to ensure that that change is moving in the direction we would like it to move in. So now let's talk about the Summit of the Future, which is a gathering to take place in 2024 with a ministerial session in 2023. And this is an opportunity for, it's a longer runway now for a conversation about these very issues. And the Coalition for the UN We Need today is launching an initiative to hopefully galvanize civil society, to deepen our understandings, and to organize key asks and proposals. So what might this look like? Or what are we proposing it's going to look like? So we're hoping to host annual gatherings, currently known as the Global Futures Forum, to take place in the upcoming marches. And if we want to organize marches in Marches, then that would be fantastic as well. But in March of 2023, this would prepare us for the SDG Summit and the Summit of the Future Ministerial. In 2024, it would help lay the groundwork for the Summit of the Future. And in 2025, for the World Social Summit Part 2, the 30-year revamp, perhaps, of the social development agenda. In advance of this, or corresponding with this, we'll be organizing some written work, currently called People's Pact for the Future, but everything, of course, is open for further discussion. And that People's Pact we are proposing would be laid out along the lines of what the Secretary-General has thus far proposed. So there are a few issues that he has suggested should be discussed and debated among member states: new agenda for peace, an emergency platform that I almost called a resilience council, thanks to Georgios. And we're all quite familiar with these different items, even outer space and the Global Digital Compact. These are specific areas that the Secretary-General has laid out as his proposals for the outcome, the Pact for the Future. And one thing that we know is that actually the member states are open to civil society contributions, and perhaps Nidara will touch on this a bit more. But even in this Declaration on Future Generations, there was a process whereby civil society could contribute, and the contributions made were actually very well integrated into the elements paper. Now, of course, it's just an elements paper, it's not the final product, but if it's in an elements paper, someone's got to be bold enough to remove it, which is a much better position to be in than someone being bold enough to insert it, which is a lot more difficult. So we are hoping to host e-discussions around each of these themes. We're hoping to tap a couple of experts, some of whom are on the call, some of whom are in the room, to lead drafting on some of the key asks that we would want. We're hoping to host regional and even national meetings in this process. So what we are trying to propose is kind of a parallel civil society process that will, I think the future will tell, but that will be more robust than what even the member states are currently planning. And we already are engaging in this process. We've had things like this Global People's Assembly. We've had dialogues that the C4UN has convened at a global level. We have monthly dialogues that'll plug, the next of which is on the 27th of September, right here in this room if you're here, or in this online if you're online. And that'll be on participation and representation. And the results of all of these initiatives will coalesce, and we're hoping we can utilize different media and movement approaches to also raise awareness and build consensus. So with the balance of our time together, I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers today to discuss these opportunities and approaches in greater detail. I will do my best to watch the chat box as well. It's a little awkward because I see my face when I look down from a different angle, it's like from above. Anyways, so we'll discuss all these things in greater detail. We'll look at the SDG Summit, Summit of the Future, regional and national forums. And finally, we have a colleague from the United Nations join us to perhaps reflect on what she's heard thus far, but also how the UN will be supporting civil society engagement moving forward. So we have the privilege of beginning with Florence Chievu, the Executive Director of the SDGs Kenya Forum, who in hopefully 5-ish minutes will articulate some expectations and opportunities for the SDG Summit taking place in September 2023. Florence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
If she's not audible, just put it in the chat and I'll give her a nudge and then she'll get louder.
Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Florence Yombo from the SDGs Kenya Forum. And so for me, it's a very, very timely conversation. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jeff, for this invitation, and also to the GCAP Coalition and the Action for SDGs. The People's Assembly has always been a very good opportunity for us, especially those coming from the Global South, to be able to speak in solidarity, but also to sort of learn from one another what's going on from the different spheres or spaces of civil society organizations. And so today, I just want to add my voice, or the voice, like some of the things that maybe we need to also sort of prioritize on. And I'll start by saying that, of course, if you look through a lot of what is happening, especially in the Global South, with the post-pandemics that have happened, be it COVID-19, but also the effects of the war in Ukraine, has really had a very, very great impact among civil society organizations, but also among people within these spaces. And so how then do we focus ourselves towards a people-centered governance in a post-pandemic world? And so there's a lot in terms of really getting the voices of the people and ensuring that as we speak about SDG Summit next year, that authentic voices or what really is going on from communities can really be captured. Because I say this having been part and parcel of post-2015 process, which was very, very successful in terms of ensuring that people's voices could be well articulated, that came up with the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals. And so I believe it's important for us to take the same kind of approach to ensure that as we talk about SDG Summit, as we give in our views, that we don't miss out on authentic voices that come from grassroots level. Of course, transformation of current governance. I believe we've missed out on the voices of communities because of the issues of the current governance, whereby at country level, many times the voices of communities are not very well articulated, be it through governments, be it through the UN system, be it through just the systems that many times speak for countries or for people. And so ensuring that we can transform, or we can call for reforms to transform our governance is quite important, because again, if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, then what are some of these critical voices that need to be heard? Of course, issues of building institutional resilience and improving institutional effectiveness and accountability. This is again related because again, I think one of the biggest challenges or one of the biggest weaknesses is the issues of weak institutions at a lot of country level in a lot of the Global South, whereby even when the institutions exist, even when there's a lot of accountability that is not effective. And so how then do we strengthen, what do we program moving forward to ensure that there's building of institutions, but also building of opportunities for accountability. And so for me, it's more about citizen voices. How do we have these voices very well captured? How do we ensure that these voices processes? Yeah, and so again, as we move towards the SDG Summit as civil society organizations, I'm glad that today we are coming out with an urgent call to action that's geared toward accelerating implementation of SDGs, leaving no one behind. And so I believe this is an opportune time for us to ensure that we can effectively launch this call and ensure that every person or all these people that want to be involved can all see this as an opportunity, but also a space for them to be, well represented. There's also growing concern in progress towards attaining a lot of the SDGs, from SDG 1 to SDG 5 on issues of gender equality. Education until today is still, a far-fetched idea for many Global South countries. There's a lot of, lack of access to water and sanitation. energy access. And so we cannot continue to live as if this is not the reality in a lot of these countries. And so even as we talk about reforms and summits, then how do we ensure that we can refocus, or we can now really ensure that we can now engage effectively for the implementation of some of these critical human rights-based kind of goals. And so as I come to my conclusion, I'd want us to also focus on evidence-based advocacy, whereby we cannot, as I maybe just giving some statistics here and there, but for us as civil society organizations, we have to be well organized, or we have to come up with credible research in terms of supporting some of the positions we want to take. When you talk about leaving one behind, then of course, what's the evidence on that? How do we critically bring this to the table, to the UN reforms, to policy and decision makers? So there's a huge space and a huge concern for us to put together evidence. I know there's a lot of evidence out here sometimes, but again, it's all over the place. Then how do we collect that and ensure that that can speak for some of our interventions moving forward? And then, of course, this has to be an inclusive process whereby we do not leave marginalized or community-based or the global south communities. We have to ensure that all voices within civil society organizations can be well articulated. And again, we have to have equal opportunities for all, so that it's not a one-sided affair. How do we ensure that these interventions can be for all of us? And then lastly, on issues of partnerships, how do we partner as civil society? For us to partner in a better way. I know it's improved since the Millennium Development Goals, SDG implementation until today, is improved partnerships, but I believe we can do better. And so as civil society organizations, we have to showcase how best can we continuously partner, because many times we want to partner with governments, with private sector and other stakeholders, but amongst ourselves, we still have great opportunities where we can partner to make this world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Florence. I actually might ask that we not applaud, not because applause isn't worth it, but because there are those who are joining remotely who would be applauding alone in a room, and that, can you imagine their spouses and children seeing that? It would be a little strange. So let's move straight without any pause over to Nudara Youssef, who's the Global Governance Innovation Network Facilitator. She's with Stimson Center. She's the C4UN Youth Coordinator. She's all kinds of things, but all of them have to do with this process. And so we're looking forward to hearing your understanding of the Global Futures Forum and the Summit of the Future, and whatever else you'd like to say in 5 minutes, if you could. Please.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Dan, and good morning to those of you in the room. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on where you are joining us online. So just to kind of very quickly, many of you may have noticed, and if you've been following the sort of UNGA debates, that there has been surprisingly low levels of attention given to the Our Common Agenda process. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, depending on what you're expecting. But given that this is Secretary-General Guterres' flagship report, given that it was such a big initiative that pushed so many governments for various different resolutions, we had a UN Youth Office resolution. As Dan outlined, we had an elements paper on future generations. We had the modalities resolution for the summits of the future. So there's some sort of, maybe it's the fact that it's the summits of the future has now been pushed to 2024, and so member states are sort of taking a minute before they get to it. But still, the ministerial forum is going to be in 2023. And at some point, sort of the UN member states will wake up and go, oh, right, there is this summit that we need to sort of be ready for and come prepared with. So our kind of task as civil society, as the groups that we are, will be to be prepared for when member states sort of wake up and say, I need to engage with this. And be prepared with tools, platforms, sort of the ability to support their engagement and support the intergovernmental process. So I'm just going to very quickly operationalize and outline sort of what that could look like, prefacing all of that with this is just a sort of we've thought about it, we've suggested it, we've proposed it to different people. But the reason we're bringing it to the Global People's Assembly is to have everyone contribute, shape it in their own way. This really needs to be a sort of global civil society movement, not just a couple of people sitting in New York. So the Global sort of Futures Forum, touching on what Dan said, has 3 concrete pillars that so far we've thought of, again, really welcoming sort of inputs here. The first is the People's Pact for the Future. Dan has already outlined this process, so I won't get into it any further, but please do sort of get in touch if there are any questions on that front. The second is actually, Florence, what you touched on, research-backed policy engagement. So this includes a couple initiatives we've already launched, which is a Youth Futures series, where we've invited young authors to contribute research as opposed to just sort of advocacy, which is important, but having that research element as well. To us, we've got people that are sort of reading through it. We've got some volunteers that are supporting us. It's also going to the high-level advisory board. So we're taking the research from young authors, not just on youth agendas, on agendas of global financial architecture, environment, digital governance, peace and security, and sending that to the high-level advisory board for their consideration as well. So please email me if you are a young person listening in on this call and have some research you would like to contribute. The second part of that research-backed policy engagement is support to missions. So we've been in consultation with several missions whilst we've been sort of in New York and during UNGA Week. And one of the things that we've heard is actually it would be very helpful to have resources ready, to have some support systems in place coming in from civil society. So that, when it is time to engage on these matters, there's something that these member states can go to, because not all member states have the ability to be financed and sort of backed by very large operations. The third sort of part of that, and this is something we're still brainstorming, is a policy engagement day. So having, coming off the back of the Global Futures Forum, having a day of just sort of taking what the outcomes of that forum were and sort of engaging with missions, engaging with key policy actors. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is cross-fertilizing and streamlining the work of civil society and civil society organizations. So in other words, doing what we do best, bringing networks together, bringing groups together, making sure that we're on similar pages, if not always on the same agenda and following the same priorities. At least we know what people are doing, we know where we can go to, we know where the points of intersection are. And really have this be a civil society moment in March, the Global Futures Forum, that's able to feed into the intergovernmental processes in September. So the point being that, the reason for March is that will give us 6 months to engage effectively in a streamlined strategic manner before the September sort of big summits take place. So really feeding into the intergovernmental processes. And I'll just sort of finish off with a note on the organizational structures that we're thinking of. So, big considerations on this front include having sort of global South travel funds, having participation that's sort of diverse. We're thinking of having it around the time of CSW, so a lot of people are already in New York and able to participate in person. We're thinking of creating an advisory council that will sort of advise and support the initiative, and who will then lead a sort of a smaller organizing team that will constitute of potentially sort of young people and young leaders, so that we're really modeling the idea of co-leadership, the idea of intergenerational leadership. So, and I think sort of exemplifying the fact that there's energy and, we can have that organizing team sort of drive forward, but supported by a group of people that have the experience in these initiatives. So, if any of these things ring a bell with you or strike a chord with you, please do get in touch. We've got Jeff here, we've got sort of several people that you can connect with. And it, really, we want to make this something that people can own, that it's a global initiative. So I will just end with, if we make enough noise, eventually member states will hear us. And I think if we coordinate that noise and resonate together, it'll be that much louder and that much more impactful. So see you again soon in 2023 when we see all this take shape. But back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Nudara. I love all the musical references. You said strike a chord, ring a bell, make noise in concert. Like there's so much music. It's just lovely. This is
Music to your ears.
It's Jaws. Look at that. Doesn't miss a beat. Okay. So speaking of ownership, diversifying ownership, we're actually going to turn now to our colleague on Zoom. So those in the room, we will mute ourselves, and that's when you can get your food and not worry about distracting. But we'll turn over to Javier Suraski, who is the Governance for Development Coordinator for CPI, and he'll speak a bit about prospects for regional and national forums as they are hopefully taking shape. So Javier, you have the floor, I hope.
Yes, I hope so. It's a pleasure again to be here sharing with you some thoughts related to this important process we all are engaged in. And I want today to share with you some reference to national and regional processes of engagement in this global movement towards a strong summit of the future. But I want also to share with you some specific ideas related to what was mentioned in previous interventions, the ability of the civil society to move forward advocacy actions. I mean, we all know that the civil society can move forward advocacy actions, but it is time to start decided what are the priorities we need to advocate for. So we know that the Secretary-General briefed the UN member states on progress towards implementing the proposals of the report Our Common Agenda on August, and the Secretary-General highlighted that the common goal of the Summit of the Future and the SDGs meeting that will take place in the coming years is creating conditions for a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future. However, aligning the two conferences requires more than an effort to interlinking calendars. It requires intertwining three meetings, goals, efforts, and working processes. To be crystal clear, it is hard to imagine that it could happen without intensive work to promote coherence between what was twin meetings that had become triplets as a result of the Summit of the Future meeting process split into different meetings. So today I want to start sharing with you 4 ways in which I think civil society could work to connect the triplets and get the best possible results. The first one is related to linking the discussions. Sorry, something strong happened here. Are you hearing me? Yes? Are you hearing me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So my first proposal is to work under what I call the yes approach. And this yes approach means including from the beginning youth, elderly people, plus experience and science. We are promoting very hard, in fact, youth engagement in these processes. And I think that it is okay because they are in a certain way in the future. They will enjoy or suffer the consequences of our today's decision, and they should be part of the decision making. But I'm afraid we are forgetting about the elderlies. And the elderlies can bring to the discussion an experience that the youth cannot put on the table. So yes, we need to support the youth because it's a very important actor for action, but it is dangerous to promote action without experience and thinking. And then we need to promote an integrated approach that could be able to act with the youth and with the elderly people at the same time and in the same level. And we talk about elderly people, and it reminds me the world experience. And I think that, again, we are maybe overestimating science contribution. I came from a university. I mean, I work at an university. I am a professor, and I am a researcher at my university. But be aware, science is not the solution for everything. And in fact, science was part of the creation of the problems that we are living today. So we need to listen to science, definitely. Yes, we need to listen to science, but we also need to understand different way to understand the world and to gain knowledge. And I'm thinking, for example, about wisdom that can came from different people, from different ways of understanding the world. Science is a Western product, and it is still a Western product. So we need to learn from science, but also from different views of the world that will help us to connect the meeting and to create a coherent final product that could represent us all. Second, a second issue that we need to advocate for, states should remind that the UN was created by we, the peoples, not by governments. The more and more extended inclusion of the member countries' no objection clause in the UN conference modality documents, directly aimed at blocking stakeholder engagement, is simply unacceptable. And this clause is in the modalities documents of the high-level meeting of the Summit of the Future and in the modalities of the Summit of the Future itself. It is unacceptable and we need to voice it. 3, we need to advocate for action-oriented outcomes. I'm tired of listening possible solutions, and I'm tired of listening we have all the resources we need to implement them, but we never implement them. So we need to create a strong change linking 5 different actions: prioritize, act, measure, learn, and report. We need to be sure that the 5 steps will be part of all the meetings that will come: the SDG Summit, the high-level Summit on the Future, and the Summit of the Future. And finally, coming to my last point, we need to unleash the regions. Regional assets and the UNDS reform at the regional level that opens new opportunities that must be included as tools to reach the goals that came out from the meetings. So we need to increase our consideration of the regions and our consideration of the interregional meeting. And that means that if we will ask from the states to provide new space and increase the visibility of the work at the regional level, we need to do the same. So our process towards the meeting should help to build strong regional outputs from the civil society and to build common positions from the regions, because that is the way to be strong when we discuss with states. We need not only inputs, we need not only to discuss at the regional level, we need to create consensus at each regional level to work together. So finally, I need to share with you a personal thought. I think that we need fewer summits and more bravery to do what the UN members have promised to do, but not in 2015, but back in 1945, to practice tolerance, to unite our strength to maintain international peace, to ensure by the acceptance of principles and institutions of methods that armed force shall not be used, and to employ international machinery to the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all people. So we need to move back to 1945. It is not about the 2015 agenda or the Paris Agreement. If we want to build the UN for the future, if we want to discuss the future, it is important to move back to 1945, understand what happened, understand what were our mistakes, because we need to act now. And we need to act now because we all know that the clock is ticking without waiting for the right diplomatic time that never comes, but needs to be built. So thank you so much for listening these simply ideas, and I hope that we will have much more opportunities to continue discussing about it. Thank you.
Boy, Javier, maybe you said those were simply ideas, but they were not simple ideas. I am so grateful to you for your contribution. There was no way I was going to cut you off because it was brilliantly put, and I'm just grateful that this session is being recorded so that we can all go back and listen to it again. Javier is always reliable with contributions like that. So again, very grateful to you. And so now, Andy Guitao, who's the Chief of Advocacy and Civil Society Section at the UN Department of Global Communications, has the unenviable task of following Javier and offering some reflections and contributions regarding how UNDGC, as it is known, hopes to support many of the efforts towards civil society participation so that we can hear more Javiers making their valuable contributions. So Andy, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I very much wish I could be there with you all, but I feel really lucky to even be able to join virtually. And it is, as you said, the unenviable task to follow. But I do have to say, for me, being able to hear and to listen is both, as corny as it sounds, incredibly inspiring and really helpful to hear what all the prior speakers have said. So thank you for that. Just before I jump in, really quickly want to just congratulate civil society representatives for their participation in the Transforming Education Summit. I got to be there and hear the on the ground experiences and how those voices were heard. So it was incredibly important. And also a sincere thanks to all the youth networks who provided input highlighting the need for a UN Youth Office, which, as you all know, was just approved by the UN General Assembly. So huge, significant achievements, I think, really demonstrating the power of collaboration on that. So clearly there is progress, being made on so many fronts, and progress in achieving the SDGs, but as Florence mentioned, COVID-19, recent conflicts have, absolutely set us back. So we're behind on the SDGs and challenges, from health, food security, education, economic progress. And so I think this all really sets the scene that it's more important, and more clear that really only by working together can we move forward. Question remains, how do we do that? So as mentioned, last year as the UN celebrated its 75th anniversary, member states vowed to strengthen global cooperation. So asked CSG to prepare the report with the suggestions for advancing the shared agenda and addressing challenges. And Dan, as you mentioned, we issued that report last year, our common agenda, or OCA. So OCA, as we all know, looks ahead to 2050, and it reflects his vision, the SDG's vision, the future of international cooperation, and it advocates for the inclusive networked multilateralism. So really among its many priorities, OCA is this kind of blueprint of how the UN can better work and engage with external stakeholders in ways that are innovative, in ways that really do have impact. So, the way I think we're viewing it internally is that OCA is this booster shot that we need to be back on track. So key focus, as you all know, of OCA is enhancing and ensuring a robust civil society engagement. So, and I know a number of you have actually, contributed inputs to the drafting of the reports. And really, I did want to spend some time really focusing on kind of what's happening with OCA, because it is this platform, I think, for the summits coming up. So as many of you know, for more than 50 years, DGC, the Department of Global Communications, has formally engaged with civil society, including through the Non-Governmental Liaison Service, which was relocated to my section 5 years ago. So DGC, together with the UN Office for Partnerships and DESA, is leading on the implementation of OCA as it relates to civil society engagement. So we're not alone, though. The entire UN system is engaged in this effort. And for it to be successful, it really does require a shift in mentality and in practice. So it's an incredibly unique opportunity. I think, Javier, as you mentioned, going back to 1945, this is really one of the bigger shifts that we've seen and commitments in this way. So again, a real unique and important opportunity. So to this end, OCA asks that all UN entities, so across the entire UN system, establish dedicated civil society focal points who are responsible for the implementation. And earlier this month, I'm really happy to say that senior level society focal points from, again, across the entire system were designated and met to discuss how to begin this kind of implementation and really implement the different recommendations. So this includes surveys being done across the UN system, and discussions and surveys also being held not only within the UN, but also externally, with civil society. And information is being shared, again, internally and externally, and that's kind of part of the phasing that we have. So OCA is looking at how to create safer and more inclusive civic space, how to analyze our engagement with you, and provide enhanced access to information, to create best practices, and to craft a strategy that will ensure your voices are included across UN meetings and processes. And this is both global and country levels. So I do have to say it's been, again, at the risk of sounding incredibly inspiring to see that it's not just an exercise that people are checking and ticking off. There's real engagement, there are real numbers of people attending and taking that responsibility and seeing it as this opportunity. So certainly the ongoing complementary efforts of C4UN and other organizations and civil society actors are critical to ensuring that this work continues, and that, as the SG said, we build UN 2.0. So as mentioned, OCA is really serving as this incredibly important platform and foundation to see the path forward as we move to these two upcoming moments, the 2023 SDG Summit and the 2024 Summit of the Future. So both of these summits share the objective of creating conditions for a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future, offering really important opportunities to reflect on existing ideas. And as you know, the SDG, the 2023 Summit will be convened really almost a year to the day from now, and having the opportunity to review the status of the implementation of Agenda 2030. And as mentioned, the 2024 Summit of the Future will adopt a Pact for the Future, which will be this concise, action-oriented outcome document. And these summits really represent a key moment for member states. So we're reviewing it to deliver new policies, create new ambitious action pledges and commitments. Member states are acknowledging that that can't be done by governments alone. And the relevance of OCA, I think, in this process is crucial, as it proposes one of the tenets is a stronger engagement with non-state actors in all fields of work and in all kind of common areas of interest. So the summits are really this opportunity to build on what OCA recommends by inviting member states to review their commitment to welcome civil society into the conversation with legal and operational mechanisms that really guarantee this inclusive collaboration. What I can say is we're committed to OCA. My team and I will continue to work integrating the different perspectives into the planning, discussion, and rolling out of the summits, certainly within the scope of our mandate. And we very much see, not just looking forward to working with you all on this, but that is an essential element of it. So, you represent the voices and hopes of millions around the world, and just the UN would not be the organization it is without you. So we very much look forward to this kind of journey together through 2024.
Thank you so much, Andy, for that open door that you have just ensured that we have. And we know we have it in a sense, but sometimes maybe we have to work on walking through. And so let's make sure that we not only walk through that door, but we walk through it together with the many partners who are interested. There are member states, particularly as Nidar referenced, small island states, many of the other smaller missions are very interested because the UN is a place where they have more voice on the global stage than in other spaces. We can partner with them. We have friends within the UN, UNDGC, DESA, and many others who are really trying to help this process flourish in a way that is inclusive and diverse. And so I think the onus is a bit on us to make sure that we are providing the information that would be helpful. We are doing it in collaboration at the regional level, at the national and even local level, and that we continue the effort. And that's sort of the aspiration for this session, was to open a process whereby there's a structure, there's a format, but it's flexible enough, as Javier was referencing, for the diversity of different regions to come through, but also for us to coalesce around some of those key asks. So we have about 5 to 10 minutes remaining, depending on how generous our handlers at the Global People's Assembly are. And so what I'll ask is, if there are those who wish to make a contribution, you can either raise your virtual hand. I promise I'm doing my best to look down there, or you can raise your hand in here, and I'll call on you, but I will ask that you keep your comment short, unlike I have been doing, in order to allow more to speak. So please, go right ahead. All right.
Yes, I think all of these issues are really positive and exemplary, and hopefully will live up to their expectations. The reality, I think, is we rarely, if ever, have really reached the grassroots. And I think the opportunity to do so is critical at this point. If we don't do that, if we don't achieve that, we haven't achieved either the basis for the evidence that's been referred to or the inclusivity that's our objective. I think we can do it. I have one example. We did a program before the Olympics in Gumchang and set up social media. To this very day, there's input that comes from it. So I think there is this opportunity to have an ongoing opportunity for people using the one thing that just about everybody has in the world, their handheld cell phone, to contribute. And even more importantly, for us to be able to translate into words and concepts that are really known and understood, not that we use here, we as experts and professionals, even as civil society professionals, but that people at the grassroots will understand. So I think we need to charge ourselves with the requirement to create those channels that will be a two-way opportunity to be able to say to the world, to the member states, to these various meetings, that we truly are in touch with the peoples. We are the peoples. Without doing it, we are not. We're a group of us who meet with each other, come up with wonderful initiatives, and that's it. In order to translate it to action that we really all want, I think we need to do that. We aren't there yet. So I really hope that this group will be an initiative to try to get there as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Mandy.
So just to pick up on your comment, and I know that Javier also talked about we the peoples, Nodara, you talked about civil society participation. Just three points. One is we can't expect everyone to come to New York, Geneva, or Rome. We need to go to the people. And just online participation will not be enough because of the digital device that exists, people's access and so on. So really a concentrated outreach strategy to civil society, to communities on the ground would be most helpful. Second point, appreciate the setting up of focal points under our common agenda report. There's a little danger because we know that some UN agencies and offices do very well as far as civil society participation is concerned, others not so well. So how do we develop best practices? How do we develop a coordinating mechanism between these focal points so that they can all be open, they can all be robust, and how they engage with people at large is something perhaps for consideration as we go forward. And the third is really about participation, and it's going to be, let's keep the ambition about, let's keep the ambition within the UN 75 declaration on board. And here something has to change. Something really has to change to show a commitment from the UN, given that this is a summit for the future. This cannot be focused on the current moment when we have civil society organizations being persecuted for speaking truth to power. Something needs to change with regards to that. So Here, for example, a very simple act of participation as we speak at Anga 77, from 16th to 30th of September, civil society cannot even access the building. So there's already this dichotomy, this perplexingly discriminatory attitude. If that attitude does not change, we cannot have a summit that really truly reflects we the peoples.
Thank you so much, Hanasa.
Thank you. I would like to bring up this inclusion idea, the protagonism of the civil society. We have an important work in Brazil with the favelas, which would bring the voice from the young people from the favelas to the global initiatives, because we need to hear their voices. We need to hear the underrepresented voices to be able to come up with the good ideas for that. And thinking about that, I also have this framework for humanitarian communication. We need to have this framework for communication inside our initiatives. Communication and education, they walk side by side, and we are talking about a humanitarian inclusive education and communication that should be part of this. So when we plan the actions, they should think about the dialogue with the civil society, how we going to have accessibility for information for the civil society and for their participation in those initiatives. So I think the humanitarian communication is very important to be considered at this point.
Thank you so much, Another Maria.
Hello, everybody. I'm coming with experience of the European Union, also dealing with all the other continents. And I think that, in fact, this triplet of the 3 summits can create a big opportunity. From my viewpoint, what is at stake with the first summit is to strengthen the commitment with SDGs agenda with updated terms from all the stakeholders, all the member states, all the parties involved. Then the second summit on the future should focus on what should be delivered at the global level. And the third one, I would say, is the final test of consistency, focusing on the social, making sure that everybody really have access to the new commitments. For me, this is a full coherence we can ensure with these 3 summits. But I will conclude by saying something about the summit to the future, because this is the most difficult one. And I believe that this should focus on the concerns of citizens, which can only be met with strong global action. And so they should focus on the new global goods we need to deliver. I see 4 main: climate, environment, health, and preventing new pandemics, ensuring that we avoid absolute poverty and forced migration, and fourth, peace and security. These are 4 things which can only be delivered at global level. We need to make the case. And then we need to come with the means. And the means are trade, aligned with these new standards. They are technology, including the digital, and they are finance, including taxation. And then you need to provide a good, strong governance framework to deliver on this. I agree with the role of the regions, because we need to have big players. I agree with the need of involving all the key generations and all the key stakeholders. So our governance needs to be updated to put all these processes into motion. And let me tell you, the final test for success is not just summit, is to know if the 3 summits will launch a long-term process powerful to change the unfair global order we have.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more contributions, Hawa and then Georgios, and then we'll do our best to wrap up. So Hawa, you have the floor.
Sure. Thanks, Dan, and thanks to all the speakers that have spoken, and a special thanks to my chief Andy for sharing what's happening with the OCA. But to piggyback on what Aaron and Javier and others have said about the reach at the regional, national, and grassroots level, I just wanted to flag that civil society also has the opportunity to work with UN structures on the ground. Similar conversations are happening at the country level as well on OCA. and through country teams, which also includes UN, DGC, information centers and services. So I think that's an opportunity there that this structure, should also take a look at. And I hope that at a later date we'll have, a sort of deeper dive into what that national, regional, and grassroots level, interaction would look like. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hala. And Georgios.
Thank you, Dan, and everybody. Two suggestions. One is about the participation. When we want to attract the attention of the civil society at grassroots levels, it's not probably the think tankers or the university people who should do that. So I think it's good within our group to identify those who are good at one and the other. We're trying to do everything sometimes, and we're not good at that. So from our organization, folks, I think we're more like a niche intellectual new capacity building something organization, but we're not going to the grassroots. So you have to admit that. So the others who do it, so we have a partnership, we need a partnership and clear roles within our group. And the second one, also it's good to clarify that what we want some organizations from our national governments, it's not the same at the global level, the games are played there. So we should not allow our internal criticism for governments or regions to take over, and then we're working against the interest of our regions at the global level. What I mean is that sometimes we all sound pro-Western because the West is certainly internally better organized and better governed internally, if I can give that generalization. But when you go to the global level, division of resources, etc., the West is not treating the rest. I mean, you need some resistance to the rules of trade and other things that the West has established, or finance. So let organizations also keep that in mind, that when you talk critically about your internal rules, when you go to the global level, you have to be critical about others also outside and support the region's interests. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for giving us a minute or two over. It has been really a stimulating conversation. Just by a very brief way of wrap up. Firstly, these are really nuanced and challenging issues. And I think it's really helpful to know what our various lanes are and to sort of drive in those lanes as best we can, to just refer to what Georgios was saying and really what all of us have been saying in one way or another. Another dimension is that these things act in concert. I always think about sort of the diversity of humanity. In one part, you have people who are obese, and another part, you have people who are struggling with starvation. And and the solution is not the same for both. And so we have to make sure that we're nuancing and understanding these. And a lot of this comes down to the systems. The last thing I want to say is that I think this principle that Maria Joao was referring to of subsidiarity is quite important. If we just try to see our local concerns and bring them to the international level, it actually may lose its power. Whereas if we engage with our mayors and other representatives at that level, it has greater strength. And likewise, if we are able to translate those concerns into the global context, it will also have a better impact at the global conversations we're having. So let this be the kickoff of at least a year and a half, perhaps longer process of figuring out what the future holds for all of us. And that will take all of us. So we have our assignments moving forward, and we have an open door for all of us to be participating, contributing, and please approach this in a mode of learning where we all have a lot to gain from the perspectives of others, rather than a mode of advocacy where we're trying to convince everyone that we are right. That's one challenge that I have for myself, and I hope we can all take that up, and in that way we build on each other's strengths and learn. And so thank you once again to the Global People's Assembly for giving us the opportunity to contribute in this space. Wishing you all the best of luck, a wonderful rest of your UNGA, a wonderful conclusion of the GPA, and we will be in touch, I hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. That was really a great session. So now we are preparing for the Global Justice March. So that will be a really exciting final session. We will have one more session afterwards, but this is a closing session of the Global People's Assembly. I think there are some technical things to be done. In a few minutes, we will be set up. So do we have the translation in place?